a brief missile scare in Saudi Arabia, a burst of hostility in the Persian Gulf, and a look at the rise of old hatreds across the new Europe. This is the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer sitting in tonight for Dan Rather. Good evening. Another ominous sign today of what war in the Persian Gulf could entail if hostilities do break out. For the second time this month, the Iraqis held another test firing of a Soviet-made missile with enough range to strike targets. Dave has our report.
Iraq test-fired a Scud missile inside its own borders today, well away from American troops, but still enough to send them scrambling on alert. Although Saddam Hussein may not want to start a war, U.S. intelligence officers believe a surprise attack is still a real threat, and not just to American troops.
As a last resort, if he fears war is inevitable, he could initiate open conflict, which may include a provocation with Israel in an attempt to decouple the coalition of forces.
The feeling that war is inevitable seems to be spreading. Today, the State Department ordered all non-essential Americans at the U.S. embassies in Jordan and the Sudan to leave before the January 15th deadline. There have been anti-American demonstrations in Jordan ever since the start of Operation Desert Shield.
It is a precautionary move, obviously, although I would imagine that many people in the Arab world will read it as a prelude or as an indication that the United States is going to embark on an attack on Iraq.
Saddam continues to pour men and materiel into Kuwait, showing no sign he intends to pull out, no matter what the cost.
You're looking at an economy that's embargoed right now, and this man is spending tremendous resources to build defenses in Kuwait and on his western flank. And that suggests to me that he has all intention of remaining there.
So far, the embargo does not seem to be having much impact on the Iraqi military. A U.S. intelligence officer said Iraqi troops in Kuwait are being adequately supplied, and the Iraqi Air Force has actually increased its flying hours. David Martin, CBS News, Saudi Arabia.
U.S. sailors boarded an Iraqi vessel in the Arabian Sea today to enforce the UN trade embargo against Iraq. The sailors ran into some resistance, not just from the crew, but also from dozens of women from an international peace group. Our Pentagon correspondent Jim Stewart has that story.
She was a ship looking for a confrontation, the Pentagon believes, and early this morning the Iraqi-flagged Ibn Khaldun found it. Her holds were filled with embargoed cargo, and her passenger list contained 250 women peace activists, among them several Americans, including a congressional staff member. Scuffling broke out when the women formed a human chain near the bridge and pushed and pulled at U.S. servicemen's weapons.
A member of the crew attempted to hold the boarding party members back and grab their weapons.
U.S. troops fired shots into the air and used concussion grenades to disperse the crowd. The Pentagon says no one was seriously hurt. One of the women on board has been identified as E. Faye Williams, a staff member of the House Committee on the District of Columbia, and twice a Democratic nominee for Congress in Louisiana. The Ibn Khaldun began its cruise earlier this month carrying a multinational group calling itself Women for Peace. She made publicity stops in Tunis, Tripoli, the port of Sudan, Aden, and was bound for the port of Basra in Iraq with what the group claimed was a load of humanitarian medical supplies. After ignoring repeated warnings, early this morning, the Khaldun was stopped by British, Australian, and U.S. warships near Oman, and a boarding party sent over by helicopter. A search of the ship revealed cargo in violation of UN sanctions.
They found teas, oil, sugar, and other prohibited items.
Today's was only the latest of more than 700 boardings in the waters around Iraq. The net effect, says the Pentagon, is a stranglehold with a price tag and lost revenue and trade for Baghdad of more than $100 million a day and growing. Jim Stewart, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Some American doctors who are just back from Baghdad sanctions have doubled the infant mortality rate in Iraq. The doctors belong to an international group of physicians that won the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize. Richard Wagner now with that report.
Despite the fact that essential food and medicine are exempt from United Nations sanctions, Iraq continues to claim that children are dying here for lack of both.
It is a character of the American government not to send medicines and food, and the first who start to suffer are children.
The Iraqis have been using children as propaganda since the start of this conflict, and now they say that more than 2,000 have died since August because of the economic blockade, a figure disputed by many Western diplomats. But while we were visiting a Baghdad hospital, this month-old infant boy died of blood poisoning. And his doctor said he could have saved him if he had the necessary medicine. The boy's mother blames President Bush.
He's a victim because of Bush.
He's a victim because of Bush.
Because of Bush.
There is an effort to get vital medicine into Iraq. From Jordan, more than 16 tons of free relief have begun heading this way.
The hospitals has run short, of course, as everybody knows, of all medicines. So these medicines are very much needed to be used by the Iraqi Red Crescent in order to save hundreds of lives, especially children.
On the other side of the coin, there's a serious charge against Iraq that when it invaded Kuwait, it took scores of incubators away, leaving more than 300 premature babies to die. CBS News has seen incubators here, but no one would tell us where they came from. What we were told is that children are dying unnecessarily here every day. And we were also told that large quantities of medicines ordered by Iraq are sitting in European airports. Medication cash-poor Iraq can't pay for. And the suppliers are saying, no money, no medicine. Richard Wagner, CBS News, Baghdad.
The Soviet Congress today granted Mikhail Gorbachev new authority to wield power over all facets of Soviet life. And Gorbachev named a Communist Party official to be his right-hand man as vice president. John Sheehan reports.
On paper today, Mikhail Gorbachev became the most powerful leader in the history of the Soviet Union. The Congress of People's Deputies gave him direct authority over all government agencies, including the military.
Now he'll be everything. He'll be British Queen and the American president and everything in the same time.
But even as they voted superpowers for the president, some deputies commented on how little real authority Gorbachev commands.
The more powers he has, I mean formal powers, this doesn't mean he will have the confidence of the people. He has to gain it back.
Gorbachev is blamed for the shortage of necessities. Critics of his democratic reforms say, now we can open our mouths, but we have no food to put in them. The growing independence movement in Moldavia will likely be the next test of the president's new powers. Last week, Gorbachev issued a decree ordering separatist organizations to disband by January 1st. Conservative deputies are goading him to use force. The country is fed up with our so-called democracy, said this colonel. We must reestablish order. Tomorrow, there will be an election in Parliament. There's only one candidate, Gennady Yanayev, Gorbachev's nominee for the newly created office of vice president. Yanayev is a bureaucrat acceptable to the hardliners and inoffensive to most liberals. Accepting the nomination, he reassured the Congress that he is a convinced communist to the depths of his soul. Tonight, Gorbachev has almost everything he wanted, and perhaps nothing. Vast powers, but only limited prospects of relieving the unrest in an angry, hungry nation. John Sheehan, CBS News, Moscow.
And still to come on the CBS Evening News, Mark Phillips on just how many of us there are and where, and Jerry Boyne on the death of a young woman and the legal battle she leaves behind.
My grandfather loved the unknown. I want a sure thing. I drive a new kind of Oldsmobile, the all-new Bravada, perfect for this jungle because it's got Smart Trap, a new anti-lock braking and all-wheel drive system that automatically sends power to the wheel that needs it. So I'm ready for the unexpected, whether I'm traveling across the river and into the trees.
This is the new generation.
Or just visiting your old man in the sea.
Bravada, engineered for the unexpected.
Kids feel sick at the thought of taking bad-tasting medicine.
Open up.
But not new grape-flavored Dimetap DM for colds and coughs.
You'll like Dimetap.
New Dimetap DM. It relieves kids as well as colds, as well as coughs.
This is Nicorette. It's nicotine gum. And Nicorette is available only from your doctor. Ask your doctor whether Nicorette is right for you.
In just a few seconds, you'll be a witness to another Publishers Clearinghouse winning moment.
You're a winner in the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? This is marvelous.
If you don't move it, I'm going to take some. Well, you're treating us like we're king and queen.
Billy Nation sure was happy he entered the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. You'd be even happier if you won $10 million. You can if you enter now. Then on January 25th, maybe you'll say,
Well, the Census Bureau is out today with its 1990 U.S. population count. The state-by-state results mean California will gain the most seats in Congress. New York is the big loser. Mark Phillips has our report.
It's official. There are, the Census Bureau says, 249,632,692 of us, 10% more than when they last counted 10 years ago. California, predictably, has the most people with almost 30 million, Wyoming the fewest at less than 500,000. But the census shows lots of us have moved around. From the Northeast, we've gone south. From the Midwest, we've gone west.
The West is the big population gainer with a gain of 22.3% in its population. The South has gained 13.5%.
And as the population shifts, so does political power. Reapportionment of seats in the House of Representatives to match the census will redraw the political map. California's the big winner, gaining 7 seats. Florida gains 4, Texas 3, 5 other states gain a seat each. The losers from the North and the Midwest Rust Belt, New York down 3. Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania down 2 seats each. 7 other states each lose a seat.
I believe that we have seen here a full, fair, and efficient census.
Others say it's been unfair. First there were charges that the counters missed a lot of people. Now the lower numbers for the big cities means less representation and less funding for programs.
At the Commerce Department, statistical grand larceny has become a way of life. And the inevitable undercounting, underfunding, and underrepresentation have become as certain.
The Census Bureau responded to earlier criticism by going back to some areas and adjusting the number upward. Today's figure, they say, is as close to reality as they can come. It'll be up to the politicians in the cities, the states, and in Washington to fight it out from here. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Washington.
Nancy Cruzan, the woman at the center of the U.S. Supreme Court's first right-to-die case, died today. Jerry Bowen now has that story.
Nancy Cruzan died before dawn today at the Missouri hospital where she'd lain in an irreversible coma for more than 7 years and where protesters held one last vigil.
I'm afraid that Nancy Cruzan lost, and I'm afraid that every one of us is a little bit of a loser because our lives are a little less protected.
Her parents, who had fought a 3-year legal battle in the landmark right-to-die case, were at her side. And in a statement, they said they're convinced they carried out what their 33-year-old daughter would have wanted.
Knowing Nancy as only a family can, there remains no question that we made the choice she would want. Nancy, we will always love you and hold your memory in our hearts.
Cruzan had been in deteriorating condition since a judge approved removal of her feeding tube 12 days ago. Protesters of that decision were still planning an emergency appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court today when her death was announced and the debate was renewed.
Nancy Cruzan did not die with dignity. She died a painful, slow, horrendous death.
She died with dignity, but the 7 years before were cruelty. It's just the reverse.
Nancy Cruzan's case prompted new interest in right-to-die laws, especially after last summer's Supreme Court ruling that said the decision to terminate medical care rests with the states if the patients have left no instructions, no living will.
The fact that you have something written down is what's important, and that's what was brought out in the Cruzan case.
41 states and the District of Columbia have living will laws which allow individuals to leave binding instructions on medical care in the event they are left unable to communicate. In California, the state with the first living will law, the Cruzan case has triggered a flood of inquiries to health care groups.
We're responding to many, many more inquiries about these kinds of issues, how one stays in control of one's health decisions than ever before. In fact, we're processing about 1,000 requests a week.
The right-to-die debate may now shift from Missouri to Washington State, where a petition drive is forcing the issue of legalized euthanasia before the legislature. A question of not just allowing a person to die, but also of aiding the effort. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And stay with us now for more news, including John Blackstone on how this woman came to be Miss April on a calendar in Berkeley, California.